100 Years of Solitude, through the eyes of a climate scientist president. In the quiet hours between cabinet meetings and climate summits, President Claudia Sheinbaum found herself drawn to the yellowed pages of Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, perhaps recognizing in its cyclical nature the same patterns she had observed in atmospheric data, the same inevitability she had witnessed in political seasons. One can only wonder what memories stirred in Mexico's first female president as she traced the rise and fall of the Buendia dynasty, seeing perhaps reflections of her own nation's endless cycles of hope and disillusionment. Gabriel García Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude is not merely a novel. It is a fever dream of Latin American consciousness, a literary hurricane that swept across the world when it was published in 1967. This epic chronicle of the Buendia family spans 7 generations in the mythical town of Macondo, weaving together reality and fantasy with such seamless artistry that readers emerge forever changed, unable to distinguish between what is possible and what is magical. The genesis of Macondo. The story begins with José Arcadio Buendia, the family patriarch whose insatiable curiosity and obsession with alchemy set the tone for generations of Buendias to come. Along with his wife, Ursula Iguaran, he founds Macondo in a pristine location where the world was so recent that many things lacked names. This primordial innocence doesn't last long, as José Arcadio becomes increasingly consumed by his scientific experiments and eventual madness, tied to a chestnut tree where he speaks only in Latin until his death. The town of Macondo itself becomes a character, isolated from the outside world, existing in a timeless bubble where the extraordinary mingles with the mundane. It's a place where insomnia plagues can erase collective memory, where rain falls for 4 years, 10 months, and 2 days, and where the very air seems thick with the weight of destiny. The cyclical nature of the Buendias. What makes Garcia Marquez's narrative so hypnotic is the deliberate repetition of names and characteristics across generations. José Arcadios tend to be impulsive and physically imposing, while Aurelianos are typically solitary and introspective. This pattern creates an almost mystical sense of predestination, as if the family is trapped in an endless loop of behavior and consequence. Colonel Aureliano Buendia, perhaps the most memorable character after the patriarch, embodies this cyclical nature. He wages 32 wars and loses them all, fathers 17 sons by different women, all named Aureliano, and spends his final years crafting small golden fish that he melts down only to make again. His life represents the futility of political struggle in Latin America, the endless revolutions that change everything and nothing. The women of the family, Ursula, Amaranta, Fernanda del Carpio, and others, serve as the backbone of the household, often living impossibly long lives and maintaining the family's continuity even as the men pursue their obsessions and ambitions. Ursula, in particular, lives well over a century, witnessing the family's entire arc, while gradually losing her sight, but gaining an almost supernatural understanding of the house's rhythms and secrets. Magic as reality. Garcia Marquez's genius lies in his treatment of the supernatural as utterly natural. Characters ascend to heaven while hanging laundry, plagues of insomnia and amnesia descend upon the town, and a character can be followed everywhere by a cloud of yellow butterflies. These elements aren't presented as miracles or fantasies. They're simply facts of life in Macondo, no more remarkable than rain or sunrise. This magical realism serves a deeper purpose than mere wonder. It reflects the Latin American experience, where the line between reality and myth is often blurred, where political violence can be so extreme it seems supernatural, where colonial and post-colonial history is filled with events so bizarre they strain credibility. The magic in the novel isn't an escape from reality. It's a different way of understanding reality. One might imagine that President Sheinbaum, with her scientific background in climate research, found particular resonance in Garcia Marquez's treatment of natural phenomena as both mundane and miraculous. After all, isn't climate change itself a kind of magical realism, where the impossible becomes inevitable, where decades of data transform into storms that rewrite geography overnight? The burden of history and memory. Central to the novel is the theme of memory and forgetting. The early insomnia plague threatens to erase all collective memory, forcing the townspeople to label everything with its name and function. This episode serves as a metaphor for Latin America's relationship with its own history. The constant threat of forgetting its identity, the need to constantly reinvent and rediscover itself. The novel suggests that those who cannot remember history are doomed to repeat it. But paradoxically, it also shows that even those who do remember seem powerless to break the cycle. The Buendias are acutely aware of their patterns. Ursula frequently comments on the family's tendency toward repetition, yet they cannot escape their fate. This tension between memory and forgetfulness, between learning from history and being trapped by it, runs throughout the novel like an underground river. Each generation believes it will be different, that it will break free from the family's curse of solitude, yet each finds itself enacting variations of the same tragic patterns. Political allegory and social commentary. While the novel operates on a mythical level, it's also a sharp commentary on Latin American politics and society. The endless civil wars, the arrival of foreign banana companies, the massacre of striking workers, the cycles of conservative and liberal governments, all reflect the actual history of Colombia and much of Latin America. The Banana Company episode is particularly pointed, showing how foreign capital transforms Macondo from a sleepy backwater into a boomtown, and then abandons it, leaving behind only ruins and collective amnesia about what transpired. The workers' strike and subsequent massacre eerily prefigure actual events in Colombian history, demonstrating Garcia Marquez's ability to blend prophecy with memory. The novel's treatment of political violence is neither romanticized nor sensationalized. Instead, it's presented as a kind of natural disaster, inevitable and cyclical like hurricanes or droughts. This perspective reflects a worldview shaped by centuries of political instability, where revolution and counter-revolution become as predictable as seasons. The final generation and apocalypse. As the novel progresses toward its conclusion, the sense of predestination becomes overwhelming. The final Aureliano discovers the Sanskrit manuscripts that the gypsy Melchiades had left behind, and in deciphering them, he realizes they contain the entire history of his family, written a century before the events occurred. The act of reading the prophecy coincides with its fulfillment. As he reads about the destruction of Macondo, a biblical wind begins to erase the town from existence. This ending suggests that the Buendias were never truly living their own lives, but merely acting out a script written long before their birth. Their solitude was not chosen, but imposed. Their repetitive patterns not weakness, but destiny. The novel becomes a meditation on free will and predestination, on whether we create our own stories or merely discover the stories that were always meant to be told. Literary legacy and universal resonance. 100 Years of Solitude succeeded in ways its author never anticipated. While deeply rooted in Latin American experience, it spoke to universal themes of family, memory, love, and loss that resonated across cultures. The novel helped introduce the world to Latin American literature and contributed to Garcia Marquez winning the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1982. The book's influence extends far beyond literature, inspiring filmmakers, visual artists, and musicians. Its blend of political commentary and mythical storytelling has become a template for writers seeking to capture the complexity of post-colonial experience worldwide. Conclusion: The Eternal Return. Reading 100 Years of Solitude is like experiencing a profound déjà vu that lasts for several hundred pages. Garcia Marquez created a work that feels both utterly specific to its time and place and mysteriously universal. The novel suggests that all families, all communities, all nations are trapped in their own cycles of repetition, struggling against the gravitational pull of their own history. Perhaps President Sheinbaum, closing the book in the presidential palace, recognized in the Buendia family's struggle something of her own nation's eternal quest to break free from historical patterns while honoring its deepest traditions. In a country where ancient and modern coexist, where scientific precision meets mystical thinking, where the cycles of politics seem as inevitable as the phases of the moon, Garcia Marquez's masterpiece remains as relevant as ever, a mirror reflecting not just what we were, but what we might yet become, if we can find a way to transform solitude into connection, repetition into renewal. Please like and subscribe for more.